Gunsmoke was the longest-running prime-time dramatic series in television history. If you've ever seen a Western, you know of U.S. Marshal Matt Dillon. Of course, in real life, he's James Arness.
Leon, pleasure to meet you and have you here.
Well, thank you for having us to your lovely home. City of Santa Clarita is honoring you with a 2006 Walk of Western Stars.
Yes, which certainly is a great honor. It's a great pleasure for me to be part of all this.
And the event, well, it coincides with our annual Cowboy Festival held at Melody Ranch, which has some kind of a meaning to you, I guess.
Oh, that's for sure. That's where we started our first, I'd say the first couple of years we did most of our outdoor work right there at Melody Ranch and all. It was such a great place.
Now, I understand that John Wayne initially was offered the part of Matt Dillon, U.S. Marshal, and he turned it down and recommended you.
Well, I was under contract to Duke's company for 2 years before Gunsmoke came along. And I had been in about 4 pictures for his company with him. And so he very graciously, when the Gunsmoke offer came in, he said, well, I wouldn't be able to do it, but I have a young man here under contract who I think would maybe fit the bill, you know. So he very graciously offered to introduce the first episode. And it was great. It was a wonderful thing. He was a one-of-a-kind guy. There just was never anybody else like him.
And I guess he did appear in that first episode in September of 1955. Now, was that one at Melody Ranch? Did you start right off the bat at Melody Ranch?
We did our first episode there, but he wasn't out there. He just did his piece in a studio, I think. Mm-hmm. And he did the introduction, and then the show came on.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But we did many of our, I'd say the first couple of years of the show at least, we did all of our outdoor stuff there at Melody Ranch. Mm-hmm. It certainly was the ideal place for to do these shows. You had all kinds of different locations there, including even a train that was on there and mm-hmm. things like that. So it was great to be there. And then eventually, in later years, we went probably to all these various places out at Thousand Oaks mm-hmm. and all of that. It was great country then. Now it's all built up with condominiums and stuff. But back then, there was a lot of great country out there, which we used.
Had you ever gone out to the real Dodge City at that time?
Well, we did go. I think it was about the second year of the show. Mm-hmm. And we put together a big bunch of many of the Western guys and all. We went back there and had a big celebration and so forth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing I know, you're 6'7", and I understand that certainly at the time you were the tallest person in a leading role ever. How did some of these people, you appear in a shot, you don't seem overly large compared to some of these actors. Did they have to stand on crates or something? How did that work?
Well, not really. I guess people just had to get used to it, you know. And the big thing was, of course, with the show was that we had a lot of really fine actors. And more than that, even we started out with great writing. The 2 gentlemen that originated the show, you know, it was on radio for 2 or 3 years before they brought it to mm-hmm. television. And John Meston was the man who actually, you know, conceived the idea of the whole thing. And he did most all of the radio shows. And then when it came to television, he did most of those for the first couple of years. So we had great stories, great writing, and then I think we had fine casting and directors. The whole package just came together, you know.
What would you say is the essence of Gunsmoke? I mean, what was the message that it was trying to convey?
Well, I think you could say that compared to most of the Westerns that had been on up to that point in time. No criticism of them, but they were more or less, I wouldn't say kid shows, but they were, more or less kind of fun time westerns. Whereas Gunsmoke was that they dubbed it, the adult western. But actually, I think that was the premise of it. They told stories of real life and real characters and stories that hopefully we hope the audience would become involved in that kind of approach. And evidently they did,
The one thing I often hear people ask, in 20 years, why didn't Matt Dillon ever marry Miss Kitty?
Well, the short answer there is I think that it just would have changed the whole premise of the show. The idea of Matt was that he had this job that he had to do, which was potentially a dangerous job. And it just, you would have had a different show if he'd been married and had kids, And so I think over the years, everybody realized that Matt and Kitty had a close relationship. They really cared for each other and all. But, that just wouldn't have worked really, I don't think, to have him, be a married man or with kids or something,
He loved her, though, right?
Oh, there's no question about that. No, I don't think any question there.
One person who, he looked kind of small when he stood next to you, but he was no short man, Dennis Weaver at 6'2".
Yeah.
Now, we lost him now in February.
Right.
Were you close to him?
We were very close in the early years, particularly. He was on the first 6 years of the show, which were the half-hour shows. And then he came in and out for the next couple of years. But then he split off and went on to do many other things, which is what he really wanted to do after doing 6 or 7 years of Chester. He was very talented, actually, a talented stage actor and Shakespearean actor and everything. And I think he just got to the point where, Chester wasn't, making it for him, and he had this urge to go out, which nobody blamed him for, but we were, of course, very concerned there when he was leaving because we didn't know who could replace him or where we would go with. It needed a character, something like that.
A sidekick.
Right. And fortunately, we lucked out and got Kenny Curtis, who worked into the character of Festus, and he was also a heck of an actor. That was a real characterization for Kenny, because he was actually a very sophisticated guy. He was a singer, had a great voice, and he sang with Tommy Dorsey's band and all that kind of stuff. So Festus was a real acting job for him. Boy, what a great addition to the show. He stepped in and filled that realm that Chester had been in, but not just like that. He was actually much more hardcore. He could go out and do stuff by himself, bring in, bad guys and stuff. He was a heck of a character, and it just worked like gangbusters.
Do you watch Westerns on TV?
Oh, every day, whenever I can. I always watch Gunsmoke.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. I love to watch the old shows, and many of them I never had the chance to see when we did them. Because, it was on Saturday night, and I was usually out doing something else at the time. So there are many of the shows that I had never seen. It's a lot of fun to watch TV Land, they're on there. And we were on this Westerns channel, but then a few months ago they took us off.
Was that what happened?
And that was
I know, I've seen it
too
on
bad.
there.
Of course, we were on, I think, 2 hours every night 7 days a week, so that's like 14 hours a week plus TV land. So
There'd be a lot of residuals in there. Huh?
well, I wish, yeah. But people still, we get like 100 emails a week from people that still watch it, and it's still out there.
The website, jamesarness.com, that's your website, isn't it?
Yes, and people, if they want any information about what's going on in our lives, or you can get pictures there, books, and all kinds of stuff. So.
One of the things that I saw you mentioned on your website was these mallard ducks. You've got a couple mallard ducks out in the back, one that you've named, I guess, Matt, and one Miss Kitty.
Yeah.
What's all that about?
Well, I don't know. They've come in for the last 3-4 years, I guess, but they usually stay a few days and then head out. But now they're staying. They've been here about 3 weeks. Have they been around this morning?
Yeah, actually, we saw your lovely wife out there feeding them, and so
now we can't get rid of them. I got up the other day, and one of them was looking right in the window, like, "Hey, feed me, will you?" Mm-hmm. It's fun to have them, though. It's great.
If you're watching Gunsmoke every day on TV, what else are you watching? Is anybody making a good Western these days?
Gee, I don't think so. As far as I know, there aren't any Westerns, even movie Westerns, are there?
Well, the latest one is Brokeback Mountain, which I guess you could call a Western. Did you see that one?
No, we haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
If it ever gets out on TV, we probably see it,
Was there anything that came after Gunsmoke in the Western genre that you liked?
Well, we did a show after Gunsmoke, of course, that How the West Was Won. We wound up being called the McCahans, and we did that for, I believe, 3 seasons. Mm-hmm. And I had this doggone leg that kept getting worse on me, so I was limping around, and I had to have an operation. So they decided that they just wouldn't try to continue because I'd be out of commission for 6 months, so they just folded the show. But that was, as far as I know, I don't think they've done many Westerns since then.
I want to kind of drive this back around to Melody Ranch. You say you started shooting their Gunsmoke in 1955.
Right.
Melody Ranch burned down, of course, in 1962. Were you still shooting all that time there?
Well, we were off and on there, but of course, as I say, there were many other places that we'd gotten onto at the same time. So I think we sort of, after that, I don't think we really filmed there anymore.
Right. And of course, Gene Autry owned it at that time. Did you ever run into Gene out at the ranch?
Oh, I should say. We used to see him every once in a while. And then, of course, we've seen him a number of times since. When he owned the Angels, he invited us out there to see a game and all.
Where would you stay when you were shooting out at Melody?
Well, we would drive home every night. And boy, that was a drive because it was back
to
when...
Brentwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're living here
I
then.
lived in the Palisades, actually, then, and there was no 405 freeway. There was Sepulveda Boulevard.
Yeah.
And I would drive down Sunset to Sepulveda, and here you had this street with stoplights every 2 or 3 blocks and 18-wheel trucks and this kind of stuff. Yeah, I think it used to take me about 2 hours to get out to the Melody Ranch.
And so you'd come out, I guess, like out, Foothill or San Fernando Road, I guess you would end up taking into the Santa Clarita Valley?
Right. I'd go out to Sepulveda, and then way at the other end of the valley, you turn off toward the Placerita Canyon was the place.
Right. What do you remember about what the Santa Clarita Valley, Placerita Canyon area was like at the time?
Well, it was beautiful then. It was, sort of virgin country. We could shoot any direction or up in the hills or down, it was great out there then. But it's like many other places now. One place that we did go quite a bit in the later years, the mid-years, was the Jan's Ranch, which was out past Thousand Oaks there.
Right.
They had about a 15,000-acre ranch there, I think, and everybody wanted to use it then, and we used to, there'd be 3 or 4 Westerns shooting on the ranch at the same time. But it was beautiful country. You could swing the camera around 360 degrees, and you wouldn't see a house or a telephone pole or anything. So everybody loved being out there.
One way or another, they still managed to shoot Deadwood out at the HBO series Deadwood out at Melody Ranch. Have you seen that one?
I've seen it, a couple of times. I don't know, it just seemed, I didn't really get hooked into it. I don't know.
I know they use a lot of rough language in it.
Yeah, I think a lot, so I don't know how, I guess they've got an audience there, but...
it's not your cup of tea?
Well, no, I don't think so.
You were born in 1923, Minneapolis, I understand.
Right.
You had a brother.
Right.
Tell me about him. Did you ever end up in pictures together?
Well, we never did a picture together. He actually directed a couple of Gunsmokes, I think, but of course he wound up having a great acting career himself.
His name was?
Well, he took the name Peter Graves, which Graves is a family name.
Okay.
When he came out here, I think, a couple of years after I did, 2 or 3 years after. And so he took the name Graves, and he started out, and of course he had a great career going himself there, still does. He goes out and does, he did the biography shows for a long time and things of that type, and of course had, different series and all too, so he's had a real good run there.
Now, is Arness your family name?
Yeah, that's
I've seen you credited as A-U-R.
Well, that was actually more our family name. Our actual Norwegian family name is A-U-R-S-N-E-S, but it got too complicated there. My grandfather came over from Norway, and he went through Ellis Island, so they changed that name around to A-U-R. And then when I got into this picture, the first picture I was ever in was called The Farmer's Daughter. It was a movie, and the producer of that movie, who was a really nice guy, was Dory Sherry, who later became the head of MGM and all that. And he suggested, he said, why don't you just drop the U out and make it A-R-N-E-S-S? Okay. So I wasn't going to argue with the guy.
Now, that first film, that was after World War II?
Oh, yes. Though when I got out of the Army, I went home to Minneapolis, and I was actually there for about a year, and this friend of mine who had gone through school with and all, he called up. It was like Christmas week of 1945, and he had just gotten out, and he said, well, let's get down and meet and have dinner. So we went downtown and met, and there was a blizzard going on down there, and it was all over town, so we had dinner and came out, and he said, Jesus, he said, I met this guy from L.A., in the Navy, and he said we could be out there right now, walking around in our shirt sleeves and going to the beach and everything. And he said, I think we ought to go. Anyway, we wound up coming out here, see, and that was in like January of '46 when I got here. And I thought, maybe I would just stay for 3-4 months until it warmed up at home a little and then go back. But by that time I had this part in this picture, Farmer's Daughter, so I just got a...
How'd you get your break?
Well, we went to this acting school. Somebody had suggested, gee, we thought we'd get jobs as extras or something like that. See, somebody said we might be able to do that, but they said, you should go to an acting school and learn a little bit about what it's like, so that's what we did. And this agent came to the play one night and saw me, and then he took me over to meet Mr. Sherry, and wound up getting this part. So I'd only been out here in this town for about 4 months, and I wind up in a great big Academy Award-winning picture. It was incredible.
Just before we take it from there, I want to go back to the war. You were on the beaches of Anzio in the liberation of Italy, I understand.
I was for a short time, but it was a very intense time. I got wounded, hit in the leg, and fortunately, so many guys there got terrible wounds, and many didn't ever get off the beach. It was a terrible thing over there, you know. All war is. It's
Purple Heart?
Yes, oh yeah. Wound up with that.
Did that wounded in the leg? I guess it didn't inhibit you in too big a way after you got out.
No. I went. I was in the Army hospital for about a year, and they put you through a whole lot of physical rehab, you know. And so I was in this Camp Carson out in Colorado, and you do all these exercises and everything, and then they start you walking, and I wound up walking about 10 miles a day, and so I got back into, you know, for a long time it didn't really bother me at all, but in later years I began to get a little, you know, you could tell that the leg was doing something there. You could see it in pictures, especially if you were aware of it beforehand.
Okay.
I had a little hitch in my get-up there.
Have to watch for that hitch in your get-up now when we watch these Gunsmoke reruns. What about your height? Did that ever stand in your way of getting a role that you wanted?
Well, didn't seem to really. In the early days before Gunsmoke, I think I probably got parts because I was tall. I usually played heavies, part of a gang of heavies or something, and I think maybe I got cast in that thing because I was tall, big guy, see? So I think a lot of the parts that I had were because of my size, so it worked out pretty well there.
One of those roles, I think it was 1951, so it's before Gunsmoke, was The Thing. You are The Thing.
Oh,
What's it like to be The Thing?
Right. Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about being The Thing?
Oh, well, it's always with me there. But it was great, and that was at the stage where I was trying to get any job I could, you know, and that thing came along, so I wasn't going to turn that down, you know.
I noticed, just looking through the credits, that Kurt Russell appeared in a couple episodes of Gunsmoke, and of course he went on to remake The Thing.
That's
as
right.
It happens.
That's right.
Did you ever see that remake?
We did see it, I think, some time ago, and it wasn't as good as ours, you know.
That's what I wanted to hear.
No, it didn't make it.
You know, at 20 years, you hold the title for the person to play a role, you know, the longest, as Matt Dillon. Any regrets about that?
No, not at all, really. I never had a time when I thought, gee, I've been doing this long enough, I got to go do something else. I never had that feeling at all.
I know I've heard people say it's kind of hard to tell when Hopalong Cassidy stopped and William Boyd started. Did you ever run into that with yourself and Marshal Dillon?
Well, they inevitably become linked, you know. Every time I'd go out somewhere, you know, most people would say, "Hi, Matt," you know. But that was all right.
In the role itself, how much James Arness is in Matt Dillon?
Well, I don't. That's hard to say, really. I mean, somebody else would have to. You know, it's a question you'd have to ask somebody else. I don't know. I certainly felt comfortable after I'd been in it a while. See, up to that point, I had been, you know, what you jokingly call like a two-page actor. You know, I'd have a scene here or a little scene there. But suddenly, with Gunsmoke, I had to do 15 pages every day and all the dialogue and do the whole thing. So I was way over my head. I was very concerned about it. And, you know, it was very hard the first couple of years there to get really into the character. And I did go and get some coaching, which helped me a lot. And once I got into that, then from there on, it just seemed it was there, you know, or whatever it was.
What was Gunsmoke's, how could it compete for 20 years? What was Gunsmoke's staying power?
Well, I think, as I say, well, number one, the stories were great and everything, but you did have this family of the four people, Matt, Kitty, Doc, and Festus. And then later, Buck Taylor came in, and he really fit right in and joined the family there. So he had that family aspect, and that was a very large part of it because, and I think back in those early days when dramatic shows came in, early television, you know, guys like Milton Berle and who were great, but when you started putting dramatic shows on, people began, like with our show, I think they began to, it's like having a family come into your home every Saturday night, and people look forward to seeing that family, you know, and then seeing the story as well. But the Gunsmoke family was the thing that people got used to, and they wanted to see it in their homes on Saturday night, see, and that was a big factor. All I could tell you is that I feel like the luckiest guy in the world because all these things just happened to me. I had to do, you know, I didn't even really want to do Gunsmoke. I was doing a picture at the time they wanted me to come in, and the director of this picture said, geez, I don't think you ought to get tied up in a series. He said, you know, if it goes a couple of years, he thought that maybe I was at a point where if I got just the right part in a movie that maybe I'd take off, see. And he said, I don't think you ought to do this. So I was going from his opinion. He was an old-time movie director. So I told the guys at first there I didn't want to do it, see. And that's when Duke called me in when he heard what I was saying, and he said, don't be a fool. He said, this is the greatest thing that'll ever happen to you, and you'll learn all about how to handle yourself and ride horses and do the stunts, and, you know, he said, you got to go do it. So I wasn't going to argue with that.
Well, Mr. James Arness, I want to thank you so much for having us in your lovely home. Thank you for allowing us in here and being on the show.
Well, thank you, Leon. It's my pleasure. And come back some other time. We'll do another one.
You bet. And thank you for joining us. I'm Leon Warden. Good night.